What's up and welcome back to another video. My name is Miles Away. Now today we're going to be looking at this interesting little synthesizer here, the Donner B1. Now what is the Donner B1? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the Donner B1 is the cheapest and most affordable analog synth on the market. In the title of my video, I said that this thing costs less than $115, and I wasn't lying. The Donner B1 is listed at $130, and with the discount code in my description, if you do want to pick one up, you can grab it for an additional 15% off using the code SUPMilesAway. Coming in at that price, it really puts the Donner B1 in a league of its own, especially for it being fully analog with a built-in keyboard, built-in effects, and a built-in sequencer. But price wouldn't matter if it didn't sound good. So today, let's find out how it sounds, let's learn about how it works, and at the end, I'll give you my thoughts. One final thing before we begin, Donner did reach out and ask to send me one of these to review, but no money changed hands. I do try to keep these as honest as humanly possible for you guys. I make my living off of my Miles Away original music, so please hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get started with a demo track that pushes the D1B1 to its absolute limit. All right, now hopefully you enjoyed that demo track, and I am willing to bet you probably haven't heard a synth like the Donner D1B1 sound like that before. And I specifically wanted to do something a little bit more complex than standard acid house, where it's an acid sequence with a kick drum, and really push this thing to its absolute limit with sequencing it using MIDI and USB, multi-tracking it, panning it hard left and right. And I was really blown away by how good this sounds and how much of a full song you can get with this keyboard. Now, every single synth sound you heard in that track was made using only the D1B1. Like I mentioned, I just multi-tracked it to get it to sound bigger, and I wasn't even using any particularly expensive effects. I used a couple of cheaper Walrus pedals, and then the rest of the reverbs was done using Valhalla Supermassive, which is a free reverb. Now, hopefully that goes to show you just how powerful this thing is in terms of sound. It's an analog synthesizer for less money than most pedals, most plugins, and it sounds fantastic. It sounds really, really good. But I'll come back at the end of the video with my full pros and cons and what I really think about this thing. But first, let's jump to the front panel and learn how it works and what kind of features it has. All right, well, here we are on the front panel of the Donner Essential B1 analog synthesizer. Now, the first thing I have to say is I've got to give Donner credit for the layout of this thing. Compared to a lot of other beginner synthesizers I've tried, first synthesizers, and frankly, just products this cheap, it really does feel quite well built, and it has a lot of really intuitive features and a great layout. So we've got our keyboard right here. Surprisingly, quite playable, feels really nice. And then right above that, we've got our ins and outs, headphone jack, sync in, sync out, etc. And then we have all our synth controls, our master volume, and then where the magic happens is right here, the sequencer menu and the saving presets. So a great place to start, because I really do think that this is a big advantage of the Donner B1, is to show you how the sequencer works, because I was really surprised at how powerful it is and how great it is to use. So let's go to 10. Let's go to one that's higher. You get quite a few sequences, so we don't have to worry about overwriting one of the ones that it comes with or that I made already. So let's go to 125 and we'll hit record edit, and then we'll click clear, and it is fully gone. And now we're ready to record, and I can just tap in notes to record a 16-step sequence. Watch, the light will move along as I play in notes. So now we press play, we hear it back. So sounds pretty good already, but let's go ahead and change our tempo. So we can either tap in a tempo if I think I want something along the lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, something around 100 BPM. I love acid bass lines at 100 BPM. That's much groovier. But let's say we want to make it a little bit more precise. We click tempo and we can actually change the tempo exactly how we want. Let's go for 90 BPM today. We've got two wave shapes, square and saw. I really like saw for acid. We've got our cutoff, it's that squelchy filter. We can adjust the pitch, but it snaps in place where it's in tune, which is good. The tuning on this VCO is quite solid, but it still has that VCO imperfection that, you know, is the reason why you want to go for an analog synth, right? So let's bring in the filter. We'll get that classic squelchy 303 sound. I love the sound of this filter. That to me is already worth the price of admission, because this circuitry based on the 303 has such a distinct sound. Anyway, so we've got our depth control for our filter envelope here. And our decay. Really, really nice and snappy decay envelope here. Over here, we've got our accent knob, which we'll come back to when we make another sequence that's a bit more complicated. And then here's where the magic happens. So the original 303 did not have any effects as far as I understand, but the Donner B1 has two awesome sounding analog effects. So the first one is the delay. If I enable it here, we have a bucket brigade delay, which I really love. And here's where it kind of, you know, works in Donner's favor that they design guitar pedals, because I quite like the vibe of this delay. Let's slow things down even more. That is a vibe. I love the sound of it. Okay, cool. We'll come back to that in a sec. The second effect we have is a distortion, and I'll bring that in by bringing in the knob here. And you'll notice right away the distortion does cut the volume a little bit, which is why we have a master volume over here. But it has a really nice tone once you bring in the drive back. We can make it really bright and squelchy. Or retain the bass with lots of resonance. It's cool to see how the distortion interacts with the resonance here. I think it sounds best with high resonance. Somewhere around there. Awesome. Let's bring it back without any distortion, and we will start to edit our sequence. So where was I? Right, so we have our sequence up here, and we can see it playing through the steps. I'll turn off delay for now too. So we have a lot of really cool powers here, including editing it in real time, transposing it, taking away notes, and my favorite way to edit it, which is the step edit mode. So if we hit record and we go through with the arrow keys here, we can actually go to each individual step we want to edit and add really cool effects like ratchets, glides, holds. So I'm at the first step over here and I want to add a slide to another note. So if I press slide and then we go to the next note and I will punch in another note, let's go up high. So now we have a slide. Really cool, right? So let's keep editing and add some more slides here and there. Let's accent this first one, accent this one, accent this one, accent that one, and let's hear how it sounds. We can increase the intensity of the accent like this. One thing we can do is adjust the gate length for each step, which is really cool. So I will do that by going in, and if you want to do this on the front end, it'll save for all of these, but I kind of like doing it one by one to get some variation in how I do it. So now you can hear it's not so short. And similarly, if we want our note to ring out here and not just be a rest, we can slide to the same note. So the last cool feature of the sequencer, which is really quite powerful, is that we have the ability to ratchet notes. So if we go into our record edit mode again and we go through, let's find a couple notes we want to ratchet. I think that one's a good candidate for a ratchet. So we hold down ratchet and we can choose a number between 1 and 4, which will determine how many times the note repeats within that one step. That's a little too much, but I like the idea. Love it. Let's do a couple more of those. Very, very cool. Let's bring back in the delay and hear how this sounds and jam on it a bit. Let's go to our square wave. Bring in our distortion. Very vibey. So as you can see, it's really quite straightforward to get some great sounding bass sequences on the Donner B1 without too much effort. But there's 2 more tricks that I want to show you to wrap this up that I do think take it kind of to the next level. The first one is that everything we've been doing so far in the sequencer can also be done in the way of performance effects live. The second thing is that you can actually randomize the sequences, which is one of my favorite features, as you guys know, on any synth. Being able to randomize things just leads to fun, happy accidents. So to test out the randomize function, let's go to this new pattern, we'll clear it, and then we hold pattern and press rec once, and we have now a brand new randomized pattern. So cool, just like that, right? And if we press the same button combination a second time, we now will randomize all of the effects like ratchet, slide, hold. Just like that, we're getting a whole bunch of different variations of our sequence. I think that's such a cool way and a great way to make a happy accident machine, and it's really fun to do that while playing in things with the effects and tweaking knobs. So hopefully that showed you guys how it works and just how easy it is to get great sounding sequences and patterns. But on top of those features we covered, there's also a song mode that you can use by chaining patterns together, the ability to save presets as we looked at, and that's only looking at the Donner B1D1 by itself. The real power, in my opinion, comes when you use it with other gear, because the Donner B1D1 actually has full MIDI in and out as well as MIDI over USB. This is powerful because you can use this to sequence other gear with the sequencer, or you can clock pedals, like I'll show you in a second, to the internal clock of the B1D1. Finally, it works great to program the notes in with your computer in your DAW like I would do for all of my more expensive synths. I really appreciate that they added both the full-size regular 5-pin MIDI in and out as well as MIDI over USB. That's awesome to see for such a budget synth. Well, that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Donner B1 analog synthesizer. Now, as promised, my final thoughts review with pros and cons. For the pros, I have two major pros for the Donner B1. First, of course, the price. You can't deny it, it's just an amazing deal for what you get. Secondly, I really love the sequencer. I used to own a Behringer TD3, which is the other cheap option if you want an acid machine, and it sounded great as well, sounded very similar to my memory, but the sequencer was faithfully reproduced from the original Roland model and was an absolute nightmare to use. This is genuinely a very powerful sequencer, like we talked about with ratchets, with hold, release, randomization. So just on its own, for $100, you're probably getting a good deal, even if you just want to use this to sequence other gear, or if it's your first synth and you want to learn how sequencers work and then graduate later on to something with more oscillators, more features, you can then use the Donner B1 to sequence it. As for the cons, I have a couple. Despite how great this is for the price, there are a few things worth mentioning. Firstly, the noise floor on the Donner B1 is pretty high. Whether or not that bothers you is fully up to you. For me, it really didn't make a difference when I was making those demo tracks, and you pretty much never hear it at all unless you turn on distortion and crank the gain to max. But it is worth mentioning because it's there. Secondly, while I'm totally aware that they are trying to be as faithful to the 303 as possible, it does have some of the 303's old limitations, like only one oscillator, only decay rather than a full ADSR envelope, and it would have been cool to see them add just maybe a couple more things like they added with the delay and the distortion that weren't on the original 303, but those are my only two cons. Otherwise, I really like this synth. I think it's a fantastic first option, and if you are in the market for an acid-based synth, or you just want a sequencer to sequence your other 5-pin MIDI gear, then I highly recommend you check out the Donner B1. Again, if you do want to purchase your own Donner B1, you decide you want to add one to your arsenal, please use my link in the description for 15% off with the code SUPMilesAway. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.